Matrix, Willy Miranda.
And welcome to the Paradigm Matrix with my special guest, Mary Joyce. Mary, how are you?
I'm doing real well. Good to be back with you.
Yes, yes, and I'm glad to have you back on the air. As a matter of fact, on the show, the last time that we had a conversation was about the disclosure, the NASA disclosure, and has been quite the topic of conversation lately for the past. I mean, it's been one of the biggest dominating conversations out there, and in this, how would you call it, in this genre, okay? Now it has jumped into mainstream media as we know it, so it has made a
It's
big jump.
everywhere. It's everywhere.
It's everywhere, and it's everywhere. And at times, even though people are very, very hungry for the subject matter, okay, and the information, because I believe last time there was a lot of information divulged, about the NASA disclosures, okay, and
hmm
what's being held back, okay, and there's different stories out there. There's as far as cryptids are concerned, that one's been popping around a lot, and it always will be. But one of them is really very interesting to me, and I have a little bit of a passion of, and it's something that, as a matter of fact, we had spoken about maybe about 3 or 4 years ago when I was on KCOR, and it pertains to the Cherokee little people.
We did. We talked about it a long time ago. If you ask me what I said, I certainly won't remember, but I
Oh,
do
no.
remember talking about it with you.
No, not at all. As a matter of fact, and I don't expect you to, I mean, it was, such a long time ago, but you did send me the book, and it was such a wonderful book out of your books that you have written and published, which are very insightful and easy to read, okay? They're easy on the
Because I
eye.
put lots of pictures and photos and stuff in there because I think nothing but gray matter, unless you're reading a novel, nothing but gray matter when you're talking about nonfiction is boring, or it can be, or it puts people to sleep, or so I think the visual element really is important, and I do that with all my books.
It's excellent. I mean, and I really appreciate it. As a matter of fact, I was talking to you about I just had a curiosity to see more about that book and started looking, and I saw yours on eBay, and it was on for this exorbitant amount of money, that you were really
You
surprised.
told me that just before we started to record, and I'm going, "You gotta be kidding." First of all, I wouldn't pay that much money for my book. That's ridiculous. And, the other thing is, why are people constantly trying to just focus on money all the time? Let's get the biggest buck out of anything that we do, and, there's just too much of that.
Yeah, it's capitalism at its best, right?
And it's
Yes, that's right. That's right. That's right. Now, Mary, do you have any new information regarding the Cherokee little
Actually,
people?
I know that you know this, but your audience doesn't know. This is the first time I've ever talked about this particular topic. You are the very first one that I'm going public with on this subject. In fact, it won't even be on my own website until this weekend. So this is the first in every regard. The title of my article is "I Met a Cherokee Little Person." Now, I've been sitting on this story since 2014. That's the same year that I published the book that you're referring to, which is Cherokee Little People Were Real. And the family of the little people wanted their privacy. And so the grandmother thought the world needed to know this story. And she's the one that introduced me to the little person. And um, so I've sat on it all this time. Well, the little person has since passed away. I've lost all contact with the grandmother. So this story is too unique and provides information I haven't seen anywhere else. I just couldn't see it turning to dust in my bottom drawer. And so I decided to publish it, and I use pseudonyms. So if there's still family around, they're still protected. And I just call the grandmother Shirley, and I call the little person Lily, and that's where it starts. And I don't know if you want me just to run off with this, or if you want to start off with some leading questions.
We'll ask you this, and with your experience, you have done a lot of research on this subject. Do you feel like when you have talked to any of the elders or anybody like that in some of these tribes, do you feel like they somehow protect the little people? When I say protect, like I know this it's in their legends and their lores, but
My experience now, I live very close to the Cherokee Indian Reservation here, so I've interacted with a lot of Cherokee. So this isn't just somebody living in Florida pontificating about things. My experience is that for so long, the white people or the people that weren't Indian made fun of the Indians for their belief in the little people. So they shut up about it. I think that was more a motivation than anything. The little people are quite good at protecting themselves. They can stay out of sight very easily. And here in this area, we have Bigfoot. If Bigfoot can stay out of sight of most people, the little people have a much easier time doing that. And they tend to live underground, and we have plenty of caves. This area of the mountains of western North Carolina is a perfect habitat for both the Bigfoot and the little people because they like the caves, and there's caves everywhere. It's also the reason that the military has expanded on underground facilities here because they don't have to start from scratch. They can expand upon existing caves beneath the ground and create the facilities that they want. So the caves are benefiting a lot of people or a lot of entities, whatever.
mhm. So there is an extensive infrastructure there.
Right.
So,
And there
you know,
has been a friendship with the little people, and it's kind of funny because the old timers among the Cherokee will still put out food for the little people, and if they forget to put it out, the little people are known for tossing pebbles on the roof to remind them, which I think is kind of funny.
oh yeah, it's do you often see similarities between how the tribes react to the little people and also to, let's say, Bigfoot or Sasquatch,
My
or
own personal experience has been here in North Carolina, and
mhm,
I also was out I was out in South Dakota and met a woman whose grandfather, anyhow, there was a shaman in the family, and she had some of these natural intuitive abilities. And she told me stories about the little people out there. So those are two places quite far apart, but yet the stories are similar.
it's very, of course, very interesting in that aspect, that also in South Dakota, they probably have the same stories, and I believe from what you have told me, this has been a phenomenon that's been all around the world also.
It has, it has. There are little people all around the world, and little people covers a big territory because the little people that we generally talk about with the tribes are about 3.5 feet tall, or 3.5 feet tall. There are other beings that we hear reports about that are, let's say, a foot tall. Totally different. They're not genetically connected any way whatsoever. So the term little people it needs to be defined when people start a serious conversation. And
Now,
among the tribes, 3.5 feet tall is pretty typical.
now, when we're talking about the little people, we're not talking about that they are anatomically, normal. They're not dwarfs. We're
They're
not
not
talking about.
All right, let me start sharing some of this. I became friends with a Cherokee woman, and we talked it, about different things for a long, long time, never about this subject. And one day she said to me, "quote I think my granddaughter may be a little person." And I'm going, hmm. And needless to say, we had a lot of conversations after that. I call the little person Lily. I call the grandmother Shirley. So if I confuse anybody, let me get that straightened out right away. And she was tested, the child, the little girl Lily, was studied by the chief of pediatrics at two North Carolina hospitals, Mission Hospital in Asheville and the Bowman Gray Hospital in Winston-Salem. And after years of testing, sometimes for months at a time, The doctors and their teams couldn't explain the reason for Lily's small size. She proved not to be a midget. She proved not to be a dwarf, and they never could explain it. The grandmother said that they even sent all their research over to a hospital or a university, she couldn't remember where it was, in England to study it. I suspect it was probably one of the big universities, and I really, really wish she could have remembered the name of it, because if you get something like Oxford involved in this kind of research, it certainly gives more credibility. But
Mhm.
Bowman Gray has a wonderful reputation, and that in itself should give credibility to the fact that they discovered she does not fit any category that we have, and begins to support the idea that she might indeed be a little person.
Very interesting indeed. Mary, well, how long has it been that you had that conversation?
My last conversation with her was when I completed the article. Now, mind you, the grandmother wanted the story to be shared. It's especially the mother that didn't. She
Mhm.
wanted to protect her family's privacy. So I did not go, I did not violate the trust. And so that was back in 2014. That's 12 years ago, if my math is working.
Yep, yep. And of course, did you ever have that urge, to, "Oh, man, I can't wait to share the story,"
It's very hard if you give your word. It's hard sometimes, but I just had to put it out of my mind.
Yes.
And honest and truly, I woke up one night very, very recently in the middle of the night going, this information needs to get out. It does not need to turn to dust in the bottom of your drawer because it's too unique. And actually, some of the stories that the grandmother told me are really quite interesting. I'll give you an example. When they brought the Lily home from the hospital after she was just born, infant clothes were too big for her. The little
Oh,
booties and stuff they give you for a newborn would fall right off her feet. So Shirley went and found Cabbage Patch doll clothes and plastic doll shoes so they could take her home in clothing because nothing else fit her. So that gives you an idea of how tiny she was when she was first born. And then the stories get, I think, even more interesting. One time she took Lily to the grocery store. And at this point, Lily can talk fluently, but she's the size of a 6-month-old. So they're in the store. When they're checking out, Shirley is holding Lily in her arm just because it's easier. And when the cashier was going to give the change back, this little infant who appeared to be 6 months old said, "I'll take the change," which kind of really made floored the cashier because she couldn't believe that was coming out of it, out of this little baby. And another time, and I'm going to quote this one here, they were shopping at the grocery store, and the Lily said, "Granny, pick me up and put me in the basket. I get so tired of shopping on the bottom shelves. I want to see what's up there." And the grandmother went on to say that she wasn't as tall as the grocery cart. Now, she was a teenager at that point. She was
mhm.
14 or 15 years old. That is also the age that when I met her. And when I first met her, she was wearing granny sunglasses. And I was standing next to a counter, and her eyes just barely came over the top of the counter. And her grandmother got into, and again, I better quote some of this. She said, "Lily was very sensitive to light. We thought she was bashful for a long, long time because she would always hide behind her hands. Supposedly, the menehune, which is the Hawaiian name for the little people, won't come out in the sunshine or the daytime." And in my own book about the Cherokee little people, I talk about them being called the moon people because they would only come out at night. They lived underground. They would come out at night to get their produce from their gardens and then take it back underground. So there's been many indications that their eyes are very, very sensitive to the light. And the behavior of this little Lily, supports that whole idea. And another thing which was surprising was that the child was a vegetarian.
Mm.
Again, I'm going to quote the grandmother. She said, "Another unique thing about Lily was she was a natural vegetarian since she was a baby. When everyone else in her family ate meat and too much junk food, Lily ate vegetables and didn't like sugar." So there's another something that makes her very, very unique. As for her ancestry, her father was Hawaiian, her mother Cherokee. The Hawaiians have little people, and all we could do was speculate, but we began to think that perhaps two recessive genes came together for this little child Lily to be born into this world. And sometimes recessive traits will come out. There's no way we can confirm that, but it's certainly worth contemplating.
Now, was she treated, Lily here, was she treated any differently in her community? You know, did they see her as
She was she liked being with people, she wanted to go to school. Her immune system, didn't protect her. The doctors were puzzled. They said she had an immune system, yet her immune system did not protect her from the childhood diseases that children carry around with colds and flu and things like that in grade school. And, she never could last more than a week going to school, and they finally had to homeschool her. She would have preferred to stay in school because she was actually kind of, social.
interesting? You know, one
In
thing
fact, another speculation that we have, and this is based on this, is
mm,
that maybe that's the reason that the so many of the Cherokee little people just disappeared. Maybe they didn't have the immune system to protect themselves from the germs that are in our world today. And her grandmother actually showed me her death certificate, and she died when she was 18. Now, I met her
well,
when she was 14 or 15. She died when she
um,
was 18. And the death certificate said that she died of acute respiratory distress, septic shock, and bacterial pneumonia. Everything was always affecting her lungs. So,
basically the air that we breathe.
yeah, it's the air that we breathe.
So it's the air that we breathe. And interesting enough, that was the question that I was going to get to. You know, where you know maybe that's why they were so elusive. You know, and they try to stay away from um, humankind. You know what I mean? It's
Right.
just
And
you know
the fact that the light bothers them means that they probably weren't necessarily running around in the daytime when you would most likely run into people. So that would be another thing that would keep them separated.
correct. A lot of the reports that I've read and listened to, the encounters have been at dusk. You know, with this when
And
sundown.
that's true of the Bigfoot too. They start coming out at dusk too.
Yeah, yeah, and it's and people are puzzled. You know, but again, as far as the different sizes are concerned, even here in this country, there's been reports of, like you said, there's you know, the individuals ranging from 3 feet all the way down to 12 inches. You know, maybe 15 inches. You know, which are don't have any shorter arms than legs. You know, they're very well proportioned. They're just a smaller statue. You know,
Right.
as
And some
far
of
as
them look quite different. There's one video I posted years ago. It seemed to be authentic. It was before AI came into existence, so that increases the chance that it was real. And it was a little creature about a foot tall, scampering across the floor, and it looked like I don't know, it looked more ET like,
mm,
more, uh,
okay,
you know, not a gray, but maybe a cross between a gray and I don't know, something else.
as far as the lores and the legends of the Cherokee Little People, is there some that are broken down into tricksters or any of them who do some, you know, pranks? You know, when I say things like that, legends where they they have stolen articles or
All right. The most horrifying story I have of the little people was when I was out in South Dakota, and the teenage boys of the woman that I mentioned earlier, they were cousins, and they were exploring along this creek, and they found a small cave off of this creek, and they went in it, and they found like a miniature um, bow and arrow, and the what do you call it that you put the arrows in?
oh
It was
yeah, oh,
what?
no, I'm trying to right now. And
Anyhow, whatever carries the bows, there was the bow and the arrows that went into this.
yeah,
And they took them back home, and the grandfather of the boys just chewed them out and said, "You take those back." And for a little while after that, they had a lot of problems with the little people because they were killing their chickens and they were doing different things that they normally wouldn't have done. But you can't blame them. They wanted to keep these people, the big people, from messing with their stuff.
yeah,
So they got their attention. It didn't go on for a long time, but they let it be known you better not mess with our stuff. So that's the most violent story that I can think of.
okay. You know, I've heard.
And as far as tricks go, I think this one's cute too. Another young woman here in the Cherokee area. She was 29 when I met her, I believe. And when she was a child, And to this day, their family will go up to Bigco, which is a more remote part of the reservation, and they have a trailer up there so that when they have family gatherings, they have a restroom, they have a kitchen, and, the things that they might need. Well, the kids are all playing hide and seek. And this little girl went into the trailer and she hid in the shower behind the curtain. That was her intent. But when she pulled the curtain back, there was one of these little people
Oh.
just grinning from ear to ear, scared you know what out of her, but he just wanted to play with them.
And that's the thing, with, a lot of these stories. I never heard anything as far as violence with them. I've
No, not as far as hurting
no,
anybody. I haven't heard any
no,
of those either.
no, I haven't heard any of those. One thing that I've shared with you is the stories that I've heard about them is that when they encounter the little people, they're very stoic. They're very proud. They're very, then and they're in shape, in phenomenal shape. The males that I've heard that have encountered, I mean, you could see their six packs. They're fit. I mean, they're fit. It's the typical picture that you would in your mind you would see of somebody who was really living out in the forest, you know, and
And no
living
junk
off,
food, right? No
no
junk food.
junk food, clean air, clean water, away from all these poisons that are really we're surrounded by. You know, right now there's so many medical studies that I know that with all the foods and pesticides that are just been wreaking havoc on on our on our health. And everybody's out there trying to get a remedy. You know, and that's all these pesticides and everything else, Mary.
Yeah, I even broke down and got myself one of these gizmos that you put into the water so you can purify the fruits or vegetables before you eat them. It takes about 10 minutes, and this thing, it's an ionic process of some kind.
Hmm.
And when I did it with the lettuce, I didn't notice anything, but I did it with the apples. And the apples were the only thing in the water. And I could see this stuff coming out of this little purifier. And I felt it, and it felt slimy. And what it was that coating that they put on all apples today.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's amazing. I don't think I've seen it as far as food safety is concerned, and I don't want to get off the subject, but there's been such a horrendous job being done, and as far as sanitation, as far as I'm concerned, look at what's been going on with that lettuce. You know,
Oh, yeah.
it's horrible. It
Yeah.
really is. And sometimes you don't even know. How the information age is these days, where they
Well,
tell you
that stuff isn't washing off, you know?
exactly,
And,
exactly,
people, run it under the water and they swish it around, they think they've got it clean, and that's not doing the job anymore.
exactly. And going back to this terrific subject, which as a matter of fact, I tell you that I got a heart for. It's such a fascinating story with the little people because always you're always thinking how that's going to be quite a society, quite a group, to stay away from civilization, as we
Right,
know it,
right.
you know?
Yeah, another story, and some of these stories I learned after I wrote my book, Cherokee Little People Were Real, because then the Cherokee realized I wasn't gonna make fun of them, that I was open and believed that these little, beings existed or had existed, one or the other. Another cute story that came after that was a young woman who lived, on the Cherokee Indian Reservation, had an aunt and uncle who lived in a more remote part of North Carolina than the reservation. And she went to visit them, and they must have gotten into a conversation about little people, and the grandfather or the uncle said, "Let me show you something." And he went and took flour and spread it all over either a deck or a porch or something. And the next morning, there were little footprints in the flour. And that was just to show her that, yes, they're still around here. And of course, they were an old timey type Cherokee couple, and they would put food out, which is the reason he was so confident that the footprints would show up in the flour.
I could only picture Mary, let's say, the expansion towards the west, where you had, all these people who just got on a wagon, okay, and set out to conquer the west, right? To conquer the west. And do you think there's probably a lot of stories that haven't been shared as far as people thinking that these beings or these persons were almost like fairies? Okay, like how would
Well, the
you?
trail all I can think of is the Trail of Tears is where the white people essentially booted them out of
Oh yeah,
here
yeah,
to
yeah,
Oklahoma,
yeah.
and, there are stories, and of course, these are all secondhand stories, so there's not a way I can prove anything, but they have, talked about some of the little people traveling with them, and of course, out in Oklahoma, where there is a large Cherokee population, they do have the little people stories there too.
Oh yeah. One thing, of course, do you think that they're still around?
I do. Now, when I wrote the book, I wrote Cherokee Little People were
Yes.
real because I got all the confirmation that really proved that they're still around after I did the book. The book, though, is really important because I was able to my interviews went back to 2020, no, 2001. And I interviewed men mostly in their 80s who had worked on construction at Western Carolina University, which is here in Western North Carolina. And they were the ones that discovered the little tunnels. They were the ones that found the little skeletons. And I am so grateful that I took time to do those interviews because all those people have died now. And but they were eyewitnesses to these kinds of things. Like one guy, he's the one that told me about a little skull that was on a professor's desk or a scientist's desk at the university. And he said it was a child skull from the Indian mound. Well, one English teacher came in one day, I think from the high school level, picked it up and looked at it and said, "This is not a child's skull. It doesn't have his wisdom teeth." And as you know, you have to be, at least 18 to
Yes.
start hatching wisdom teeth. So they had those kind of stories. They had lots of stories that I'm glad didn't get lost in the dust of unknown history.
Are you still getting people, reports that have seen
Oh, yeah, yeah.
other people? I mean,
Yeah, another one's real close to where I live. Here we live between mountain ridges, and like one or two mountain ridges away from me is a couple that I know, and they live at the top of the ridge. It's a gravel road to get there, and outside of where they pull into their, let's say, driveway, they have a game cam set up. Well, a
mm,
bird triggered it, and in the distance, you can see what looks like it might be a little person. And the couple debated, was that real or was that a spirit? And they debated sending it to me or sharing it with me. And finally, they decided they would. And it was in August. It was very hot. And so this little person is from behind, has the long, straight hair that you associate with the Cherokee. Looks like he's either nude or perhaps just has a loincloth on, and they measured the height based on a tree, and he was the basic 3.5 feet tall. I took that photo, put it in my computer, and then I enhanced the contrast. When you do that, anything that's alive will go to magenta. Anything
mhm.
that's a spirit or a ghost will stay white. Well, in one of these ghost pictures, there is a ghost on the floor playing with a very alive child. When I turned up the contrast, the child went to magenta and the ghost stayed gray. And the ghost was playing with the little child on the floor. So when I did it with their photo, the little figure was magenta. So it was clearly something alive. So the stories I've been telling you are the ones that you will not find in my book. You will find other stories that hopefully are very, very interesting, but these are bits and pieces that have come to me since I published that. And again, both the book and the story about the grandmother and the Cherokee little person came out in 2014.
Yes. Now, going back to what you just said, have you do you also think there's a possibility that they have a knowledge, okay, of that, of, let's say,
I don't
that
have any firsthand experience that would say that that is true. I have long time ago in earlier research found that there is a tribe out in the far west, and they revere the little people as
Okay.
being wise and things of, having knowledge that is to be revered.
Yes.
Also, I did a recent posting, well, not that recent, within the last year and a half, about the ant people that live underground, and they actually have antennae, and we know about them with the Navajo, or the people in the southwestern part of the United States. Well, going back to ancient cultures, they also have them engraved in rock, going back to a time when they said the dwarfs, they use the word dwarfs, when the dwarfs were revered as very highly to be respected, I guess is what I should say.
Well, that's
So
interesting.
you could
That's
you
very
could dive
interesting.
in this you could dive into this many ways, but I haven't done it to the satisfaction where I would boldly say, yes, this is true, because I have not heard great wisdom coming from a little person here in Western Carolina. They may be spouting off wisdom, I do not know, but
Yes.
I've not heard about it.
One thing, would it be fair to say, how were they treated in this side of like in North Carolina, and how,
All
they
the native tribes accept them and are not, somehow just regard them as another type of people.
Mhm.
The native tribes also do with that with the Bigfoot. They regard them as just another type of people. But that's pretty common among native people around the world, from what I have pieced together. Everybody else who isn't a native, we're so much in our head and so much intellect that we block even exploring those possibilities because
Yes.
they think, "Oh, this can't be true. I'm not spending my
Uh,
time." And those very people are the ones that need to be spending the time. And that's why I was so grateful that the chief of pediatrics at two major hospitals did major studies on this little girl, Lily, because that cracks through to people who aren't so willing to believe these kind of things.
no, there's not too many open minds out there at all. They're willing to believe some other things, I'll tell you that much, that we question. You and I will question right away. But something like this, I mean, which has been, I believe, this is nothing new. There's these folklores where little people have been around for centuries.
Let
You
me tell
know,
you the irony. Any university, you think they're going to be open-minded, curious, and they're going to want to investigate everything. The anthropology department at Western Carolina University is built where they put in a supporting wall, and that supporting wall blocks out the entrance to, I believe it's 3 Little People tunnels. Now, in my opinion, if they had even made a peek hole and they had focused more on these pieces of evidence on the university that the Little People existed, they could have started a wonderful archaeology department. They do have an anthropology department, and it's ironic that that is separated from this great
mhm.
piece of history by a wall that we can't get through.
And again, I mean, it's going to be one of these things where the Smithsonian isn't going to be involved in any of this, because even their practices have been questionable, and
Absolutely.
you
Well,
and I know.
I want to defend them right now because Trump has had signs put outside the Smithsonian debunking the whole institution. That is an extreme and it's wrong. But also, the Smithsonian has been noted as being the hider of giant skeletons.
Yes, and I was just going to get to that.
Yeah. And they even, again, I did not see this, but an anthropology student at Western Carolina University who had already graduated told me that at one time there were 2 giant skeletons. They had 6 toes on each foot, probably 6 fingers too, I don't know. But those had been shipped off to the Smithsonian. So who knows?
Yeah,
And
with
things aren't always what they seem to be. I give you
oh no,
another example.
not at all.
They have found 2 Indian mounds on Western Carolina University, and they talked about the Indian mound. Well, the old timers said that that used to be in a farmer's field, and the farmer put these great big logs or timbers or whatever, about 6 inches in diameter, put several into the hole that went straight down into the tunnel to keep his cattle from falling in there, which is just weird enough to sound believable. And the old timers told me that wasn't an Indian mound. That was like the dirt heap from these little tunnels being created. And
There has to be somewhere.
another guy who was a farmer at the time, he they were using the plow and the horses. And this one young guy who was in school would go that way to school every day. And he got into conversations with this farmer at different points, and the farmer expressed his concern that one of his horses might break a leg or get hurt when one of these little tunnels coming out from that mound collapsed. And so here was another farmer acknowledging that these little tunnels came out from this tunnel, from this mound, which really wasn't what we consider to be an Indian mound.
And again, the tunnel systems around that area are very extensive. It's the cave systems, it's extensive. And when you're
Right.
gonna
Now,
see a lot of these
we need to
reports.
be at two different levels here. When I was talking earlier about the Bigfoot and the little people hiding in tunnels or
Mhm.
in caves, that's true. But these tunnels that I'm talking about that were found all over this part of North Carolina, especially at the university, were cut out of dense red clay, and they were square cut with an arch top, which helps it become, stronger and
Stable.
more
Yep,
stable. So these weren't deep like the caves that I was referring to earlier.
yep.
It was
And some of
truly
these
a
caves are
tunnel
just natural.
in the
Yeah,
red
these are
clay.
natural.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes. So again, it is fascinating. And again, the subject's fascinating. It's always been fresh to me, and that's the way I had to look at it, because there's really it's not as spoken about. And of course, we always I wonder how many more people who have not said anything. You and I have spoken about UFO reports, and of course, people who are very hesitant to speak about any of their experiences. It took me into my late 40s to talk about my experience, okay, that I had in Puerto Rico, okay, and often people are not gonna. I bet you there's a lot of people who have seen something, or have had some type of encounter, you know,
We
with
we have we have a concern at two different levels. When you and I have experiences like that, the biggest thing that keeps us from talking is we don't want to be laughed at or dismissed as
yeah,
crazy. That's the most common thing. But some of these true whistleblowers, the ones that really, really reveal things that the government doesn't want us to know, they have a legitimate reason for being scared. And there's been quite a few of them who have died, who have been killed.
hey, Mary, I know that secrets can be kept,
Yes,
okay? I mean, there always have been, I mean, not too far from where you live, there's facilities that, either were around World War II. You're talking about Tennessee where they were doing some work on the bomb,
mm,
okay? Which a lot of employees, even though that was compartmentalized, okay, which is done to this day, but secrets can be kept, and authorities, they will not only threaten you with your pension, they will threaten you with your life.
that's true. That's true. And so I have great sympathy. I really understand
Hmm.
the reluctance of some of these people who have really incredible information. I
Yes,
understand their reluctance to come forward. I mean, their families are threatened too sometimes. So
correct,
it
correct.
takes true, legitimate whistleblowers who who really do come forth and speak about it. They're courageous. They're truly
No, without a
courageous.
doubt, without a doubt. I mean, if of course, you've probably interviewed some yourself, met some yourself, and of course, you know how it's not easy. It's not easy to talk about something when it's hanging over your head, and I can only imagine when it's your life we're talking about here, or the
Right,
life of your loved ones.
right.
Okay, yeah, it's not easy at all. You know, as far as the book is concerned, the book is still available, correct?
Correct. And please get it through Amazon. Amazon will not, make you pay $50 for it.
I got, I gotta send you that. I gotta, but I got my copy, and I was very, very appreciative of your other copy. You know how dear it is to me to have a signed copy. To me, it's a big, big deal.
You're
And as a
kind.
matter of
Thank you.
fact, and as a matter, no, thank you. Thank you for being a friend. Not only have you been my guest in several shows, but you've been a good friend. Have you been out in the speaking circuit, Mary? Have you talked in any of
No,
the conferences?
I have responsibilities at the moment that keeps me pretty close to home. I've been
Okay.
taking care of a woman who's 94, and so I've not been doing any traveling.
which is not an easy job being a caretaker. It's demanding,
And the
demanding, and
wonderful thing about technology is we really can get in touch this way.
oh
You know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so you can still, be in touch with the world even if you don't go on the travel circuit.
that's so true. That's so true. Mary, can you give us where or tell us where to we can contact you? Of course, your wonderful books, which are so illustrated, and of course the Facebook page, and of course the the cashier's page. I know that that's still
Okay.
up, right?
The
And then
the
you need a
website
website.
the
Yeah.
website, which I've had since 2008, is called skyshipsovercashers.com. Cashers is spelled like a cashier at the grocery store. Skyshipsovercashers.com. On the left-hand side of the home page, you will see Editor's Corner. If you open that up, you will find out any of the contact information you might need to know.
And you still putting out the newsletter, correct?
It's not really, it's a notification. When I have new things posted on the website, I send out notices to some people, just giving you a highlight of whatever I posted that particular week. But it doesn't qualify as a newsletter.
That's what I call it. And I'm always I'm subscribed, so I've always been subscribed. So it's some good information. You do some very good research, Mary. And I thank you for everything that you do.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Always good to
And
talk to you.
same here, and thank you for sharing that story. And I hope to have you back on again
All
on
righty.
the
You have a
Paradigm Matrix.
good rest of the day. Take care.
Thank you very much, Mary. You have a great one.
Welcome to the Paradigm Matrix with your host, Willy Miranda. This has been the Paradigm Matrix hosted by Willy Miranda.